Okay, so you can call me a casual for this take because I know there have probably been plenty of matchups throughout UFC history that resemble this one, both in the past and even in the modern era. But I genuinely believe that Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev is one of the most competitive, if not the most evenly matched 50-50 fight in the modern history of the sport, especially when it comes to a title fight, because I really can't think of any other matchup on paper that looks this close, and even if we compare it to a recent high-profile fight like Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira, most fans were either clearly backing their guy or leaning strongly one way or the other. Like in my case, I picked Topuria and felt confident about it, while Oliveira fans were equally sure he would win. But this du Plessis versus Chimaev fight is completely different, because fans on both sides seem genuinely nervous and unsure for good reason, since this is the ultimate stylistic chess match with two drastically different yet equally effective skill sets, and the two most probable outcomes everyone seems to agree on are either Khamzat securing a dominant early submission or Dricus surviving the early storm and eventually winning by late TKO or decision. And while there are always outlier scenarios like Dricus landing something crazy early or Khamzat somehow dragging him into deep waters and still winning on points, those are clearly less likely than the two obvious paths to victory. So if either of those main outcomes ends up happening, we're all going to be looking back saying of course that was going to happen because it made perfect sense. But both men have such clear and strong ways to win that it makes picking a winner borderline impossible. And I find myself switching sides every week leading up to the fight, because as of right now, I'm slightly leaning Khamzat Chimaev by maybe second-round submission, but I already know by next week when it comes time to lock in official picks, I might just go with Dricus du Plessis, because I've never been less confident in a fight prediction than I am for this one. And it's wild to think that this fight got announced around the same time fans were hoping for Topuria versus Islam Makhachev or Tom Aspinall versus John Jones, both of which fell apart. And while this matchup might have initially felt like the third option, as we get closer to fight night, it's become arguably the most compelling one left on the calendar. And maybe some of that excitement is amplified because we've been slogging through this weird UFC Apex era where even the best cards, like the recent one with multiple finishes and 2 Fight of the Year contenders, are being stuffed into a lifeless Apex setting, which really takes the energy out of it all and honestly just makes you want to scream at the UFC to get out of the Apex already because it's actually hurting the product. But back to the fight, I'm starting to feel genuinely nervous for either guy the closer we get because while there's this narrative floating around that Khamzat has poor cardio, I think it's been overstated based on him going full force in the early rounds, which naturally tires any fighter out. But when you rewatch his fights against Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, he clearly shows that he can go 3 hard rounds and still throw with power and grit in the third, and even after getting dropped. By Burns late in round 2, he still came back strong in round 3. So just because he looks a little gassed doesn't mean he's done. And more often than not, he ends fights in the first round anyway, so cardio might not even be the deciding factor here. Although I will say that if it gets to rounds 4 or 5, then the advantage probably swings to Dricus, who has proven 5-round experience and surprisingly solid cardio, despite always looking a bit labored during fights. And even though he had some nose issues in the past that got surgically corrected, I still think he looks more visibly tired than Khamzat in the championship rounds. But the thing about Dricus is, he adjusts so well during fights and has incredibly high fight IQ. Like when he faced Adesanya, he was losing the exchanges on the feet, but winning on the ground. So by round 4, he completely changed tactics and secured a takedown leading to a submission attempt against a guy who rarely gets submitted, showing his ability to adapt on the fly, which makes him very dangerous even late in the fight. And while I can't see a scenario where Dricus submits Khamzat, because Khamzat just feels physically and technically untouchable on the ground, and it's hard to even picture him on his back for more than a second, let alone being submitted. The striking comparison is interesting because even though Khabib once said that Dricus is worse than Khamzat in terms of boxing and suggested that Khamzat should keep the fight standing, and to be fair, Khamzat's boxing does look more polished technically, it still feels like wrestling is his best path to victory because he has that explosive chain wrestling and elite positional control. So if he can just dominate round 1 and either get a finish or do enough damage and control to steal the round, then he can afford to coast a little in round 2 before ramping back up with his hands in round 3, while Dricus is undeniably strong and a capable grappler himself. He's just not on Khamzat's level when it comes to pure wrestling. And if you break down each element of this fight, it becomes clear that while both guys have areas of strength, they also each have tools to neutralize the other. because Khamzat's early explosiveness matches up perfectly against Dricus's ability to endure and adjust across 5 rounds. And both guys are durable, both can go to war, both have finishing power, and Dricus may even have the heavier hands over the full duration of the fight. Plus, he looked better than ever in the rematch with Sean Strickland, where his striking was the cleanest it's ever been, despite the awkward moment with the accidental head clash. So if his game plan is to just survive early and test Khamzat's cardio late, he may be underestimating Khamzat's ability to push for at least 3 rounds, because I think he can absolutely go hard for 3, even if the 4th and 5th would start to slip away from him. And honestly, at this point in the week, I'm thinking Khamzat wins by 2nd round submission, mostly because of how dominant he looked against Robert Whittaker. But I fully expect that I might flip my pick to Dricus next week, depending on how I feel then. And just to be clear, I always lock in my official picks in my dedicated prediction videos right before the card. So this is not a final pick, just an early take that could very well change because I've never been more on the fence about a fight in my life. So let me know who you guys think wins this one and how they do it. I appreciate you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ask ChatGPT.